This week we're talking RV Tech Talk, and I have Chris Dougherty today with me. Dustin and Ashley are out celebrating, and Zach's running the fort out there. So we got a hold of Chris, and some of you might remember Chris from the past. Chris, you did quite a few articles, technical articles for RV Travel. I met you first when you were back the technical advisor for Motorhome Magazine and Trailer Life, I believe, with Bob Livingston and those guys out there. And so tell us give us a little bit of background about yourself and what you're up to now.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, well, thank you for having me on and seeking me out here. This is great. I've been when I used to work with Chuck a long time ago doing articles here, FMCA and whatnot. And then I got hired as the technical editor for Motorhome and Trailer Life, which I did for a number of years until the pandemic, when the two magazines were combined. And so I've done, I was the tech editor or technical advisor for Bob Livingston and Bruce started a new magazine, RV Enthusiast. So I worked for them, RV Business Magazine, and I'm back with FMCA now doing some things with family RVing. And I teach a lot. I teach RV technicians, and I do seminars across the country on the consumer side.
Yep.
So I've been keeping pretty busy, and I still turn wrenches a little bit here and there. So
good. Well, I got to say that for many years, RV, the Motorhome Magazine and the Trailer Life Magazine were the go-to source of information. There was a lot of new product stuff and all that other things out there, but there was a lot of good technical information, and you guys were that. And you worked for Bob, the self-proclaimed God's gift to RVs. I worked with him.
Well,
too.
I know you spent your time, Dave, with Good Sam, and when I got asked to do that job, it was for me kind of the Mount Everest of positions in this business, and I was really honored to have it while I did.
Yeah.
And the tech part of it, I know our readers really appreciate the tech information. And, the media's changed quite a bit. There's a lot of different things out there now. So,
yeah, well, and we've talked about that many times, here within RV travel, and the state of the RV industry today is there's so much information all over the place on the internet, but what can you trust? That's the hard part. And that's where, what I like about RV travel, it's RVers, it's technicians, it's certified, you're certified, which brings up another point. I think you had kind of an unusual group of students down in someplace, wasn't it? That kind of a captive audience. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I do some training with the RV Technical Institute, and so last year I was an adjunct with them, and at the same time I've been running one of 3 programs in the country that work with people who are in jail, who are incarcerated, and who are training to have a new life when they come out of incarceration. I've been working here in Massachusetts with the Worcester County Sheriff's Office, and so not only working in the House of Corrections and doing programs in there for low risk inmates who are going to be released in relatively short order, but I've also been working in their outreach programs. So the sheriff in Worcester County is very proactive. And so they have several outreach centers where they do career training and things like that. We're also working with mass hires to bring more people in to do RV technician level 1 and hopefully level 2 training. So that we're doing that here, which is, so far it's been working out pretty well. And we also do some work with the PRVCA, the Pennsylvania RV and Camping Association. I'll be doing some level 1 and level 2 training with them also.
Yeah. What a great win-win situation. The RV industry needs technicians. Selling 600,000 RVs last year, and I mean, you can't keep up with the technicians in it, and that's a great opportunity to give these guys a trade and gals. I think I saw one group was just recently was ladies penitentiary somewhere, women's, and
in
so
Texas. Yep.
yeah, so that's great. So we've got a whole bunch of people that come in. One of the things that Dave Talenko has here is what are we giving away today, Chuck? Do you have any product out there and a hashtag or something like that? So if you do, let's post that up there. I guess that's something that normally Ashley takes care of that, and like I say, she's out gallivanting around, so we're winging it ourselves here. But I see Dave Talenko's here. Britt is from Georgia. We've got Ken, some of our standbys here. We have no questions that have come in yet, but here we do. Okay, right here I have. Well, gentlemen, I wanted to know: can you use Dicor RV roof protectant on the lap seal edges? Will it harm it or offer UV protection? So, Chris, have you used the Dicor product before?
Oh, sure, absolutely. And yeah, it's absolutely fine. It's not going to hurt anything at all. As far as offering UV protection, depends on the protectant that you're using, right? Whether it offers UV protection or not. But it should help to protect it a little bit, sure.
Yeah.
But it won't harm it for certain.
Right. And Dicor has this is their typical lap seal, and it's a self-leveling lap seal. I don't think that this has much UV protection in it. It's just a sealant, and sealant is going to dry up. It's going to, weather check over a period of time. And then the Dicor product, I think he's talking about, is that two-step where you've got the first one is a cleaner conditioner, and then the second one's a roll-on. That does have a little bit. I still don't think it's, as much of a UV protection. They're calling it a roof protection from the sun, but I don't know that it's specifically roof. But you're right. You're not gonna harm it in any way. So Chuck says that we do not have a prize today because Ashley knows how to do that and we don't. So if you put hashtag Chuck and send an email to him, he's going to send you all some money. No. And I don't know how many, like a dime maybe or something like that you can get in there. So we've got the comments come in. So we got Corey from Jacksonville, Florida. I bet it's a lot warmer there than it is here. We had some pretty nice days. I'm Northern Iowa, so we were in the 40s for a while, which is unusual. And then today it dropped down into, it was 10 this morning, and I think it got maybe up to 18. So it was like, that was not very fun. So
well, here in Massachusetts, it was 69 degrees when I went out to my truck when I left the Eastern States Exposition today. We have the Springfield RV show coming up this weekend, so we're setting up for it. And it's quite warm here.
Are you doing seminars at that show?
I am. Good.
I mean, I'll be in Harrisburg next weekend. We start Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday this year, and we got 3 stages actually. We got Harold and his wife are doing one stage. I'm doing another, and then we've got some. I think the local park, state park, and national park people are going to be talking there as well. So there we got. Look at this. Hashtag Chuck. So get your billfold ready, Chuck. I do have a question that came in, and you and I talked a little bit about it. I think it's a very interesting one. Is we've got a gentleman that has about 600 watts, I believe, of solar panel power. He's got a 60 amp charge controller for that solar panel. Then he's got a 50 amp plug-in. When he plugs into shore power, he's got a converter. And he didn't state whether he had a converter or inverter converter. I'm assuming
inverter charger. That
big of a unit, probably inverter charger, they call them. And then he's wondering, so what keeps all these things from charging at one time? You're outside with solar panel, and you've plugged into your 50 amp or even a 30 amp service, your controller, or you start your generator. It does have an automatic switch. What keeps that thought from some people is that, well, I'm going to get 13.6 or 14.6, whatever it is, out of the solar panels. But then when I'm plugged in, I'm also going to get another 13 or 14. Am I going to be at 28, 29? And so I'll let you handle that one.
Okay, yeah, that's a great question, and I can understand people, not being sure about that. So basically, what's happening is that you're looking at voltage versus amps, and voltage, amps, and watts, right? So the voltage is based on the charger itself. So when you got 600 watts of solar on the roof, and you're coming down to, I think you said it was 30 watt, 60 watt charge controller.
Yep.
Which is fine. And what that's doing, any of these smart chargers, what they're doing is they're looking for voltage, right? And so they're going to say, okay, so the batteries have gotten down to a certain level, and I'm going to charge into them, right? When you've got lithium, it changes a little bit, because lithium, the profile of a lithium battery is that it keeps a very high voltage rate right to the point where the battery's discharged, and then it'll turn itself off. That's when it has when the battery management system's determined that it has depleted the battery. But to answer your question more directly, is you're not going to overvolt the system. So you're going to have different sources that can provide that. We'll just round it off to 14 volts DC to the batteries. It's going to be a little bit more. You're going to have a smart charger. It may be a multi-stage type charger. And it changes a little bit when you've got lithium batteries, but they're going to balance each other out. Now, a good way of really fixing that is to have a dedicated DC to DC charger on the battery. So if you have multiple sources coming in, and this is something similar with, there's some inverter chargers out there that are actually have multiple inputs. Okay, so you can put your solar in through the unit, your shore power, when the shore power comes on, it's going to have a charger in it. And so these things will decide how much charge is going to go to the batteries. And it doesn't matter whether it's if it's a towable, let's say you got a fifth wheel, whatever the charge coming from the tow vehicle is, and from the inverter charger, from the solar, a DC to DC charger element will balance all that out and make sure that the batteries are getting the best charge. So there's a couple of different ways of attacking that, but even so, without a DC to DC charger, it's not going to volt the system.
Yep. No, great answer. Okay, we have Marcia. She's got a 2022 Keystone fifth wheel. The leaf springs are rather flat. Reading about breakage, should we just change them out? And that's a pretty new, 2022. I mean, it could be a year and a half old, almost 2 years old. Now we see 2024s being offered at some of the, the shows coming out, which is a little crazy. But, what's your thought on that?
Well, the first thing that I always go to when someone brings up something about suspension and springs, and they're concerned about the springs being flat or whatnot, first thing I always ask is has the vehicle been weighed? Okay, so make sure that you're within the weight ratings for the vehicle, so the gross vehicle weight rating, the axle ratings, and so forth. If you're there, if you're within those limits, it just depends on whether you have a handling issue really with the trailer or not. One of the things that can cause the springs to flatten out a little bit is wear on the moving parts of the suspension. So a lot of trailers are shipped with non-greasable spring bolts, okay? And they'll have a neoprene washer, basically a sleeve inside, that wears down pretty quickly. Usually after a season or so, that neoprene wears out, and then you've got metal on metal. And if it isn't a greasable bolt, there's no way of putting lubrication into it. So as time goes on, when you have the weight of the trailer bouncing down the road, whatever else, and it's wearing metal on metal, your spring shackles, everything else are going to start to elongate. Those holes are going to open up, both on the spring shackles themselves and then back on the equalizer, okay, in the center. I've seen those where like the center bolt hole for the equalizer is elongated by like an inch, right? Because it just wears and wears and wears on it. Nobody ever does it. So if you're concerned about that, I would get an axle service and have them, once it's up in the air, they can kind of work with the axle a little bit and just see if those are loose. And if they are, and I suspect that may be the case, even with a 2022, that you replace that with greasable bolts. Now, depends on which Keystone fifth wheel you have. Montana, usually it comes with greasable bolts, but other brands, other makes within the line may not have that from the factory. So it's something to take a look at, get that serviced and checked out. Yep. And make sure you're in alignment, and then you won't have tire wear and that type of thing also, because that's another kind of result of having that bolt wear.
Right. And I think an excellent point, the weight is the first thing, especially with those fifth wheels. And I don't think just swapping out the leaf springs is going to do much good, because a year from now, you're going to have the same thing. You got to find out what's causing that. So, a lot of those Montana fifth wheels come with the MORryde, and even up a little bit, but usually that's an option, that comes up to a certain point, and then it's standard, when you get up into the higher line stuff. But I have seen, and we've talked about this several times in our shows and the articles, that when you see units sitting side by side at a show or on the lot, and one's $5,000 or 10 or 20 or 30, there's something in there that you got to find out what's, causing that. And I would say by just going up to the better, MORryde and others like that, you could be talking somewhere in the $3,000 to $4,000. By the time you do,
you could be, and that's always an upgrade you can do, right? So a MORryde suspension upgrade, and I know Lippert's got suspension upgrades that are available also, with the cushioned equalizer. You can put shock absorbers on. There's different things you can do, but we did a project with Trailer Life where we went to MORryde in Elkhart and did an upgrade on a Coleman travel trailer, and it really wasn't that expensive, but we were able to take the kind of failed dry suspension system and bolts and whatever, and replace it, and then put the equalizer, the SRE 3000, I think it was, in there, and it makes a big difference.
Well, and if you look back at some of the articles we did have one of our readers wrote in and actually sent pictures of the elongated holes in that had, it was a little older than a year old, but they were having some real problems with the same kind of thing. So Debbie here has, do you recommend 6-volt? And I think she's referring to AGM. She put AIMs, but absorbed glass mat in place of 12-volt wet batteries. And I guess it's kind of a Ford versus Chevy debate sometimes, I think. But go ahead and hit that one, Chris.
In general, what 6-volt batteries are going to do for you, if you're looking at flooded lead acid batteries, right, FLA batteries, is 6 volts are going to have thicker plates. They're going to give you a little bit more amp hour capacity than the standard 12-volt deep cycle batteries are going to do for you. When you get up into the AGM batteries, 6-volt versus 12-volt, I'm not sure what the effect is going to be for that technology. I assume it's the same, but I actually have never researched that particular thing. I don't know, Dave, if you've ever played with that.
Yeah, the AGM battery, you really have to look at how you're RVing, and what kind of battery capacity you need and how long you're going to be out. And, we've gone through that many, many times. But in my opinion, the 6-volt batteries, you're right. You got more plates. They have more cycles available. So they're going to last a lot longer time. And the advantage of going with the AGM 6-volt batteries is that you have less sulfation. The regular flooded lead acid battery, it sulfur attacks the plates as you drain them down. And, if you don't have a multi-stage charger, that just gets thicker and thicker and thicker. And we did a video actually for Bob out there. And I think you were around at the time when we were starting to do those ABCs of RVs videos for Trailer Life and such. And we had a brand new Fleetwood Discovery that we got from a dealership as a demo to work on it. And we went through, and it had 4 6-volt lead acid batteries in there, and all of them were shot. Hadn't even been sold yet. It's just, they didn't plug it in. It sat at the manufacturer until the dealer bought it, sat at the dealership, and then, they never plugged it in. And so, there's some maintenance that's required with those lead acids, and the AGM is going to, do a little bit better of a job for it. You're not going to double. You have no more advantage in amp hours going from 12 to 6. You're going to take, and you have to have 2 of the 6s. So you got to hook them in series, positive to negative. So you're still going to have whatever group you buy. You're still going to have that, that amp hours, I guess, for it. So it's going to take more room, and so it really depends.
And you can look at the ratings of the batteries too. So
yep.
Make sure, when you're shopping for the batteries, you're looking at saying, okay, so if I take, 2 6-volt batteries, I wire them in series, I'm increasing the voltage, but the amp hour stays the same. So if I'm buying, 105 amp hour 6-volt battery, if I buy 2 of them, I'm going to have 12 volts, in average, but it's going to be, still 105.
Yeah. And keep in mind, whether it's 12 volt or 6 volt, you only get about 50% of that. With
lead technology, that is correct. And that's one of the big pluses to the lithium iron phosphate technology that's out there today.
Yep.
Is that you end up with about 98% usable energy capacity out of the batteries.
Yep. And
they also have a much longer lifespan. So even though they're more expensive to start with, for sure, you're going to replace I remember calculating out before, it was something like 3 sets of lead batteries for 1 set of lithium.
Yeah.
And
and most of your really good lithium, like Expion 360, I've got one of those. Where is it? Right behind me here, and 2 of them on the floor that we pulled out of the Thor. They have a 10-year warranty. I mean, we never saw that, when the lead acids were coming out, and they're not as susceptible to that. There is no sulfation in them, and so you're right. You go out and buy, to get the same 100 amp, you're going to have 200 amp hours of a 6-volt AGM. That means 4 batteries, and you're talking probably somewhere in the vicinity of, if you're lucky to get them under $175 a piece, I think, that's pretty average price. So you're almost at that $1,000 range, and they're probably going to be needed to be replaced in 3 to 4 years. Yep.
And if you're in a cold climate and you put your RV in storage and you let them freeze, which is a problem we have up here, a lot of people, they store their RV, they don't take care of the batteries, whatever the deal is, and we had people replace their batteries every single year. When I was at the dealership, and we sold this was a number of years ago, but 35 grand worth of batteries a year.
Yeah.
And a lot of that were people with motorhomes that were just changing them out every year because they weren't, keeping them charged and protecting them from freezing.
One of the things I would recommend, Debbie, if you're looking to buy some new batteries, go to GoPower's site. It's gpelectric.com, and they have a great calculator that says how long you're going to be out, the appliances that you're going to use, the 12-volt draw that you have. It's really hard to actually, it's not an exact science saying I'm going to need exactly this amount of battery power, but at least it gets you thinking about how long you're going to run the lights, how long you're going to do certain things. And so, that calculator kind of helps get you thinking in the idea of, how long am I going to dry camp? And so it's a really good exercise. So the next one, then we've got Ken he's purchased his Montana, and it is a 3791 RD. Already had to replace the water pump due to leaking. Is there any advantage to a variable speed volume RV water pump that I've read about? I'm going to pull this thing up right here. I mean, this is the typical SureFlow that we've used for, many years. I have had very few problems with these unless I let it freeze. That's the only thing in our areas here. A lot of people go in and They decide to blow the system out with water, with a compressed air, and they blow all the water, they open all the drains and everything. They don't realize that you've got that line coming into the pump and the line going out that has water. You have to get out of there, and you let that freeze, and it will crack that housing, or the the connectors coming to it. So I am not, the variable speed. I have not seen, FlowJet. SureFlow, I've got one sitting right over here. I don't think any of them that I've seen are variable speed. Are you familiar with those?
Yeah, there's some upgraded models that'll give you that will ramp up in speed. It's controlled by a microprocessor, so SureFlow has one. I can see if it can find it, but there's a couple of different ones out there, and so there's a couple of things you got to think about when you're putting those in. And I've done those upgrades before. They do require more amperage than the 3 or 4 diaphragm model that we had up here, a couple minutes ago. So usually requires putting in a relay, running a new dedicated power line back to your power source, to your batteries or whatnot, with circuit protection, that type of thing. It'll give you a lot better flow. It'll give you better pressure for sure, but they're expensive. But it is something to take a look at. I've done it. I had a Monaco motorhome years ago that I put one in and was very pleased with the result. You end up with less surging and that type of thing. Back then, the standard pump was the 3 diaphragm, like your SureFlow or whatnot, FlowJet. Then they came out with the 4 diaphragm, which does have a relief valve or a bypass valve built into it. So it's designed to reduce the surging and whatnot. So it's small flow amounts, it'll let water bypass within the head of the pump.
Right, but I don't think any of those are going to do anything for leaking. They're not
going to do it. No, leaking is a different thing, right? So it's damage to the pump somehow. The screws could be loose that hold the whole head of the pump together. Somebody had it apart, something like that. I've had those SureFlow ones go bad if they froze or there was a little piece of plastic. So any of these pumps are diaphragm pumps, right? So they use like a silicone or neoprene diaphragm inside with these little things that turn, and that's what creates your suction and then your pressure. Well, if they sit in little plastic circles, okay, and they have little separators between them, and where I've seen those go bad is that cracks. So you get you get freezing in there, and so sometimes the pump packing itself goes bad, which is easily replaced. You can replace any of these parts, but the pump head itself if it cracks, it's probably just better to get a new pump, because then you're kind of getting around that, the parts in the housing there.
So here is
that's the replacement
kit
for the bigger pump. That's the pump he's talking about. So what's the model on that?
It
Dave?
says here, and this is just a replacement valve for does not say.
Okay.
That's Smart Sensor 5.7 or the Smart Sensor 4.0, it looks like.
Yeah, that's what he's talking about, is the Smart Sensor. So that's what that one is designed for.
Okay.
It's a bigger pump.
Yeah, the 590X series.
Yep.
And that is...
So it's a good pump.
Kind of a breakdown of...
There you go. That's it exactly. Yep.
What that looks like. So this is the upgrade version of Chris's graphic.
Yeah, I know, right? How can I do this? I don't have one of those handy. But
no, I know. Dustin gets a kick out of it whenever somebody mentions something, and I feel like I've got Peabody's.
I probably have a SureFlow catalog over there, but I won't walk away just to go get it.
Right. But okay, so now we've got Michael said he attended my seminar at the Tampa Super Show. I did one seminar a day. I did the RV buyers seminar throughout the show. It was my first year down there. It was kind of fun to be on there. He says he's on the road and usually have poor Wi-Fi, so he could not see on the Wednesdays. And so one of the things I wanted to bring up is that tonight and last week, the week before, we went live from Orlando, I used the TravelFi hotspot. that it takes the top 5 or 6 cell phone. That what they've done is they went out and bought all this data from the top 5 or 6 cell phone providers. So you've got T-Mobile and Verizon and all these other people. And then wherever you're at, it takes the strongest signal and you buy the data that you want for that. And we had such horrible Wi-Fi that at the resort we were staying at, because it was Disney people, and all the kids were whatever they were doing. So I do want to thank TravelFi, and I hooked it up tonight just to see how it was working again. And it's one of the best hotspots that I've seen around the country. So, if you're looking to upgrade your Wi-Fi issues on the road, and we all know you go into a campground, if you're not 50 feet from the campground office, and the modem thing normally isn't going to work. So we got Snoopy's back here. I thought that multiple charging sources that your system chose the highest voltage. So, Chris, I'll let you address that.
Generally, the highest voltage is going to be the one that wins out. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Let's see. And Snoopy, I just emailed you back. You had something, I don't remember offhand what it was. I had your Zamp, not Zamp, Go Power. And I did get a hold of the technician from Go Power. And since you got 6 of the ports to hook up to that you can go, he wants to put, I believe it's 800 watts. Right now he's got a certain number of panels he wants to add to that. And they said to go with the 60 amp MPPT charger, because generally each one of those panels will do about 20 amps, 20 amps. So anyway, he said go with the 60 MPPT. So check your emails, Snoopy. We did get a hold of them, so hopefully that'll help you out. We're going to go back to Debbie says, and a follow-up. Would I need 4 6-volt batteries to replace 2 12-volt batteries, wet 100 amp hour batteries?
Yeah, so it depends on the amp hour rating of the batteries, right?
Right.
So, you've got to, when you shop the batteries, you're going to look and say, okay, how many amp hours at it? When you wire 6-volt batteries in series, you're doubling the voltage, but the amp hour stays the same. So if I'm going to look at 6-volt batteries, and I know they're 100 amp hour batteries, it will take 2 of those to replace one, 12-volt 100 amp hour battery. Yep. So it's pretty easy to do the math there and figure that out.
The one thing, and you said this a little earlier, is that normally 6-volt batteries, you can get higher amp hour. 12 volts kind of limit. They have a cap of what they get to, just because of the plates, the size of it. So the 6-volt, you can generally get a higher amp hour, but you got to get 2. So you might get up into 180. I think is the threshold.
One of the best resources that I found over the years is Trojan Battery.
Yep.
Go to their website, and I used to know one of the engineers over there, and they have just some great technical and training resources, and they have all the data on their batteries and whatnot. And so even if you're not going to necessarily buy Trojan, you can, there's any number of different brands that are out there, but there's really good learning resources there.
Yes, and I would, we've brought this up many times in articles and stuff too. Is there's a lot of really cheap batteries out there that are you're not going to be happy with them. You get to the big box stores, the discount membership places that have the $89.95 battery, and the only advantage of that is $89.95. They have the plates aren't as thick, the welds aren't very good. It's just a whole host of things that are they're not designed to really last a long time in store. They're just pretty basically a temporary battery. So Trojan's a great battery. I've done a lot of research on US Battery, does a good job with their stuff. Lifeline, when you get into the AGMs and other stuff, and of course Expion, and I think now even Go Power is selling their own line of batteries, and I've worked with them for the last 6 or 7 years in the the solar panel product that they've had, and now they've gotten into batteries, because you can have the best solar panels in the world, but if your batteries are no good, So they've kind of protected themselves, being able to sell batteries.
Sure.
Okay, so we have Timothy. Okay, toilet leaked, too bad to repair after trying to take it about. Do I need to Teflon the threads or use Teflon paste? So I think what he's saying is he completely replaced the toilet.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's looking at, hooking the water lines back up. So
yeah, I'm kind of guessing the same thing. And to answer your question, no, you don't need Teflon threads, because the female PEX fitting that's going to go onto the back of the toilet has a rubber cone or neoprene cone inside that once you hand tighten it, that's going to seal it. So you do not need Teflon paste for that. However, when you're putting the toilet down, make sure you use a new foam seal. Okay, it's like the wax ring, okay, that we use in a house, but we don't use wax on the road, for a lot of reasons. So you're just going to make sure you use the new foam seal underneath it.
Yeah.
But that's all you have to do. It's real simple.
I've got a PEX somewhere. I just can't see it right. It's small. No, yeah, it's exactly right. Okay, so Corey's got a long one here. When it was close to 40 degrees several days ago, I tried to use a Dometic DFMD 3011 furnace. After I turned it on, the fan was blowing well. Several seconds into the cycle, I could hear the rumbling of the burner lighting. Then about 5 seconds, the burner would go out. The furnace would repeat this process multiple times until I shut it off. My research indicated either the flame sensor may be dirty, which is part of the furnace igniter, or the control board. Before I try to remove I think he ran out of space. Mm-hmm. So I think I'm going to hide this here, and then I'll let you hit on that. And I'm going to look down and see if he added any more. But go ahead and give your diagnosis of what's happening there.
Well, when you're diagnosing an appliance that's doing something like that, the first thing that you've got to do is confirm the energy coming into the appliance, right? So, any appliance, no matter what it is only as good as the energy coming into it. So your 12-volt DC power has to be good, and your propane pressure has to be good. So you need to test those things first, because it could be that your propane regulator is out of adjustment. And so if there's not enough gas coming through, that can cause that to happen. Again, the flame sense, so there's a number of safeties within the furnace. Okay, so you have a flame sense. So it's trying to determine, okay, do I have ignition? So it senses that it's igniting, and then it senses flame. And if it can't sense the flame, then it's going to shut off. It's going to use the fan to purge the burn chamber, and it's going to try it again. Okay, it's going to try to ignite again. And then what can cause it to turn off? Well, one is it doesn't have flame sense, right? So I can't tell whether I have flame or not, so I'm not going to keep pumping gas into it. Second thing that can cause it to have a problem is that it overheats. Okay, so there's a thermistor on the burn chamber that if that overheats, it will also trip the system out. Okay, but it keeps the fan going. Again, it wants to exhaust the propane from the burn chamber. So you're close in that once I get to the point of I know the propane pressure is at 11 inches of water column. I know we're good there. I know I've got, you should be 12, above 12 volts DC. So if you're plugged into shore power, your solar's on, you're going to be somewhere around 13.6 volts DC. If you're there, you're probably fine. And then you can start looking within the unit, and you're just going to go through the sequence of operation. What is, you can at that point you can use a multimeter, try to determine, okay, what is tripping out in the unit, at what point is it quitting, and that can help tell you, is it a circuit board, or is it the igniter, which is also the flame sense, or is it something else?
Yeah. And that's, we tell people, if you have sulfated batteries, you may charge them up and they seem real good, but they have the tendency to do this dropout thing like you talked about. It. And then we always tell somebody, when you're running on an LP or whatever system, plug the unit in, verify you've got 13.2 at least coming from that that converter, and it'll probably go 13.6, like you said, if the batteries are low. You have your flame sensor, but before I would get that far, you've got a sail switch on the inside of this thing that the fan's got to run fast enough to raise that sail switch, and then you've got your overload temperature switch on the backside. And what I've seen, a lot of people will put rugs and stuff down inside their RV, and they'll cover the vents in there, or the elephant trunks. If you look at your typical, let me see if I can find a picture here of there we go. A lot of your furnaces are going to have these type of supply lines that go to the vents, and then you start putting stuff inside that couch storage wise, and you crimp those hoses, then the airflow is reduced, and it will start up. And then but if you don't get enough airflow going through there, either the sail switch won't make its way up, or that temperature switch with the back pressure, not being able to circulate stuff is going to cause that to happen. Or mud daubers on the outside of the exhaust vent coming in, just a little bit of blockage. So all that relates to what you said, the temperature sensor and the sail switch. But those, before I start tearing into all that other stuff, and one way of testing, somebody says, well, how do I know I have 11 inches of water column? That's a pretty specific test that you wouldn't have the average RV owner do. You wouldn't have the equipment to do it. But one of the things that I've told people in the past, and I probably got this from Bob years ago, is go in and turn on, you've got a 3-burner range in most of these. So turn the first burner on, turn the second burner on. You should get a little drop in flame, but it should come back up to that nice little blue, steady flame. Turn the third burner on, and make sure you got your vent going, because you're going to get a little bit of heat in that. But then go turn something on that like the water heater or the furnace or whatever. And if you see that, go down, then your regulator is not keeping up. And that's one of the gremlins that I call it in the appliance side of things, is that you go out and you use it and it doesn't work, and you bring it back to the dealership, and they bring it inside this nice warm service center, and they plug it into 30 amps and works fine. And then they take it out and it does the same thing. Well, you aren't simulating the same scenario as you're out there, because you don't know when that refrigerator's cycling. When the water heater might kick in at some point in time and cause some of those things. So, that's where it's important. Like you said, if you can get in and specifically test the water column, then that's
there is one other thing, Dave, that is we figured out in the shop not too long ago. The newer furnaces, the way the air intake and exhaust discharge work, you really have to have the door and the pipe in place, and there's also a plastic guard that goes behind the door. And what happens is, if those aren't in the right position, it can take exhaust gas and bring it back into the air intake, and it suffocates the flame. And that is exactly what he's, I think, talking about here, too. Is, well, not just that one. It's actually the smaller square one, where you have the air intake that comes in around the outside of the exhaust pipe itself.
Yep, I have that on the other one, and that's too heavy to bring up.
Yeah, but yeah, that's a common issue that we've run into on that one. So.
Okay.
Just checking the door to make sure it's tight and make sure the pipe is in and that the guard's in place and whatnot.
Okay. And so one of the things that I also look at is when you submit a question, also put what year and model the rig is too. So it would be good to know how old that Dometic furnace was, and that's the other thing I ask people when they send in a question: did it work before? I mean, so we can kind of maybe walk through what changed then. Was it temperature? Was it whatever? So, whoops, I just...
I was feeling fine till I went out to shovel 3 feet of snow.
Oh, you only have 3 feet? Oh, wow. Okay.
No, it was 69 degrees here today, brother. Let me tell you.
Ah,
I've never seen that. Never seen that before in February. I went out to my truck and there it was.
yeah. No, we hit 50 or 40, and we were pretty happy the last few days. Supposed to get back up to 40 this weekend, so we're looking forward to that. So Debbie then says, can you recommend a manufacturer for lithium batteries? Um, I have researched the XPN 360. And what I would say, Debbie, is look for the article on lithium batteries we've got posted in here, because you really want to find the good cells, the UL listing of it, the mechanical connections. There's a lot of junk that's coming into the market that it just doesn't last, and it's not going to hold up in the rigors of bouncing around the road. You want to, if it gets below freezing, you can't just charge it back up without a battery management system that's going to you either have an internal heater or a blanket pad like Expion has. Battleborn, Keystone is using Dragonfly. Battleborn, it's the same company, that's their OEM versus retail, and I've heard a lot of good things about them. What companies have you worked with?
Battleborn, pretty extensively. Had really good outcomes with Battleborn. Xantrex, Lithionics. I've worked with all their lithiums, and it's been good.
Yep, and I think most of those are running pretty close, about the same price. You can find a little bit of fluctuation in some of it, but if you find those $499 100 amp hour batteries, I would do some research. Definitely,
yeah, definitely, and where you end up seeing the higher cost in some of these, like Lithionics or Xantrex or whatever, is when they start having more electronics in them, so that you can monitor them through an app, or if they're even internet connected in the RV, so that you can monitor your batteries from anywhere on the planet.
Right, and they have that internal battery management system, which
they all do,
which will make sure that,
for the most part,
if you don't have a heater built into that, you can't charge them up below zero or below freezing temperatures.
Below freezing, yeah.
You'll ruin them. And they have an overcharge, and so they have a lot more management in it. So that's why they have a 10-year warranty as well. Okay.
And they're repairable. So, that's one of the things too, is if a lithium battery goes bad, if I have a Battleborn battery or whatever, and I end up having a problem with it, I can send it back. They cut it open, they test all the cells, they fix the ones that are bad, replace them, whatever, and put it in a new case and send it back to me, Yep. So it's not like if you have a failed, FLA battery that, you're whistling Dixie. That's just not the case. There's things that can be done.
Yep. So we have Facebook user here. Is it okay for a TPO roof to have a 1-inch wide bubble across the width of the roof?
Well, ideally, no. Okay. However, what I would do is, because cutting that and patching it and getting it back down, I mean, obviously the glue let go where that bubble is, and it's probably on a seam, a plywood seam underneath, which is pretty common for where that happens. So I would keep an eye on it, and make sure your sealants are good and all that sort of thing, and just make sure it doesn't get any bigger. I've seen RVs going down the road, and some of our other full-timers and stuff, I'm sure, have seen the same thing, where you see an RV going down the road and there's this huge bubble on the front of the RV because it's up like a sail, right? So you want to make sure that is not what's going to happen there.
Yeah.
And if it starts getting worse, then yes, you're going to have it looked at.
Typically,
go ahead, Dave.
Well, typically what I've seen with those with a great big bubble on that, they've had the adhesion is let loose, and so you've got a kind of a flappy roof, but somewhere you've got a slit or a pinhole that allows, when you're going down the road, you're getting air in there, and it's so that's not good, because you're also going to get moisture in there. Yeah. And that's the thing, you were saying, inspect that 1-inch strip. I would agree with you 100%. They use 4x8 sheets of plywood, or Luan, and you probably got a seam area in there, and it's just not adhered to that area, and comes up. You want to make sure it's not leaking. That's the key in that, is that it doesn't get worse and it's not leaking and you don't feel any moisture in it. And inspect the inside really well too, because the unfortunate part about roof leaks is by the time you see them, a lot of times it's a little too late.
Yeah.
They've come through the top and they've made their way somewhere, and then all of a sudden when you see it, you've got a little path of destruction, we call it.
Yep.
So Brett again says Cedar Creek fifth wheel, got around 9,000 miles on her 4 years of travel. How often do I check for brake wear? The braking is fine now, but so what's your recommendation?
Well, it depends on what kind of braking system you have on it. So fifth wheel, I don't know if Cedar Creek is actually doing hydraulic brakes or not. So it changes a little bit with that. But if it's the standard trailer brakes, the manufacturers are generally recommending the brakes are inspected 12 months, 12,000 miles. And if they're not automatic adjusting brakes, they should be readjusted at 3,000 miles.
Yep.
Or as needed for braking efficiency.
Yeah.
You've got good braking now, and they tie that together also with bearing service, right? So your bearings need to be repacked also on preferably a 12 and 12 basis. So that's a good time to inspect and adjust the brakes.
Well, and even the bearings now that are greaseless bearings, they're saying that, but they still recommend once a year to pull those apart and inspect them. Just look for burnishing or anything inside there. And one of the things that I started doing this, I ran a company for 10 years. We built a pressure washer that we put in fast food restaurants, and kind of like we had it plumbed out, and I had 3 guys on the road, trucks and trailers. We had mostly F-350s, diesels, and the trailers were about anywhere from 6,000 to 12,000 pounds. In the first year, and I quit about a year ago doing this, but ran it for 10 years, had 3 guys on the road putting at least 100,000 miles a year on those trucks and trailers. And that very first year, we had so many breakdowns out on the road. We had bearings, we had axles, we had tires, we had all this stuff. So I made them start carrying an infrared temperature gun. And every time they stopped for fuel, they would tell ambient temperature, and I had a chart, ambient temperature, hit that hub, hit that brake drum, and hit that tire, and tell me what that temperature is at. And it's a lot cheaper to repack bearings in a service center than it is on the side of the road.
Oh, no question about that.
And so what
at that point you got spindle damage or whatever, you've got to change the bearings. So if you've cooked all that and you're on the side of the road, it can be a real challenge.
Yeah. So
and what also happens is the axle slides, right? So instead of being in line, perpendicular with the trailer frame, it now moves a little bit because you start getting some play in the wheels and whatever else.
Yep.
And now you blow out a tire, and then you get all the damage from that. And
and a lot of it too. Now that I think about it, we had one guy that loved to set his auxiliary brake up to 10. He loved the feeling of every time he braked, he hit that. He went through more tires than all the other guys combined because you put it up that high, and you're going to have the brakes are going to fade faster, the tires going to slide. I mean, he practically came back with square tires almost every time he went out. It seemed like. But what that gun will do for you is that you start understanding the normal temperature is going to be 20, 30 degrees over ambient. Like that's not an issue. But now all of a sudden when you see that brake drum spike, then you got something in that braking system that's not quite right. So that's kind of my way of making sure that you don't run into problems. Where are we at? 6. We got Chuck to see. It says we got 7 minutes left, Chuck says. All right. Okay. We have, and now it's 6. So back here with Britt. Ken, I pulled it up. This trailer was built May 22. That was Ken that had, what did he? I found the leak in 1022.
Is he the guy with the?
Must have been a pump. Let me, yeah, there he is. Can't purchase the Montana. Already had to replace the water pump.
Sometimes they come down. Sometimes they just fail. I mean, you can check the torque of the 2 clamshells of the pump with the diaphragm in the middle, but Yeah, I mean, it just depends. You can have something that cracks. I mean, there's a lot of plastic parts involved.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
just
guess,
because you were never in freezing weather doesn't, I just want to point out that, if it was sitting on a dealer lot in a cold climate and it wasn't properly winterized or something along those lines,
Elkhart.
you didn't, well, Elkhart is, yeah, they usually are very good about, winterizing coaches as needed. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If it had some water in it, it could have frozen. It's hard to say.
It doesn't take much for them to, I mean, almost everybody does a water test. Manufacturers, fill it up and then low point drain and stuff like that. But it's, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that somebody there didn't realize to flush out the pump.
Yeah.
So hopefully it was covered by warranty. If it was a 2022, I get what, my question would be, where was it leaking?
Yeah, that helps to.
That'll really identify it. Yeah. I don't see a rash of leaks in water pumps. So we got Snoopy, and he says, yes, they did. Still deciding, but that all sounds good. That was my recommendation. So here he's got, Snoopy's got 6-volt batteries, have 390 amps each.
Yeah.
So you can get
different ones.
So Tim says, yes, got the rubber ring, and thanks.
One other thing, I'm thinking of, Dave, is with regard to axle service and brake service, is a lot of RVs have bearing buddies, and those I don't like them. I'm not a fan. I've repaired a lot, because what happens is you sit there and you pump grease into it, and when you look at a hub, it's a big open cavity inside, in between the bearings, that you have to basically fill with grease, and then you're trying to pressurize it to go through. Well, what happens sometimes is on the back of the hub, you hammer in an axle seal, right? So it's a metal cup, and it has a spring-loaded rubber gasket in it that goes tightly over the axle spindle.
Yep.
What happens in a lot of cases that I've seen is that when you use a bearing buddy, it pushes the grease back through that seal and into the brake cavity behind the hub.
Yep.
The drum. And then you grease everything inside that, and then the brakes don't work anymore, and you're basically replacing the brakes at that point.
Yeah, in my opinion, the biggest advantage of the brake buddy is that it does a great job of greasing the side of the trailer. Because we had them on a couple trailers, and every time they came back, it was just, it was not a good thing. And maybe there was something we were doing wrong, but we just never had any good luck with them as well.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan. So we're getting, got a couple minutes left. DK, what advice would you give to someone who purchased? It feels like I'm at a funeral here.
Yeah.
Or church.
I'm so sorry.
Chuck's going to pass. I'm Lutheran. All we need to know is how to make a hot dish. The tater tot casserole. Oh, Christ.
That's it, right?
So
my wife's Italian. She makes great pasta. We go to the,
fifth wheel from a private party, and later found out the manufacturer's out of business. That has happened for so many years. Manufacturers come and go, and so hopefully what you would be able to do is almost all the appliances in there, you're able to find manuals, because they're fairly generic. You got Norcold and Dometic and Thetford and all that stuff, so you should be able to get the OEM manuals. And I gotta say that most of the manufacturers, the RV manufacturers' manuals, aren't worth much anyway.
And if you do do a Google search for the manual for your year and make and model, and a lot of times, sometimes there's owners groups or things like that will actually have the manual available for download.
Yep.
And so I have, we have an old Lance camper here that we did projects for Trailer Life and RV Enthusiast on, and so I ended up printing out most of the manuals for it, because they weren't in the unit when we got it.
Well, we're almost out of time. We got a bunch of questions that came in, and we got quite a few people today. We had no hashtag. That was right. Chuck wanted me to leave with a joke. So there's this guy that walks into a bar with a dog, and he tells the bartender, he says, "I have a talking dog here. If he talks for you, will you give me free drinks?" The guy says, "Well, that's pretty good." He said, "Hey, ask him a question." So Chuck turns up the music. That's good. Ask him a question. He says, okay, what's on top of a house? The dog goes, roof. And the guy goes, well, that's stupid. And he said, that's not a talking dog. No, ask him another question. So, okay, who's the greatest baseball player of all time? And the dog goes, roof. And the guy goes, get out of here. And he kicks him out. And the dog picks himself up and he looks at his owner. He goes, what, DiMaggio? All right. So, do you know what a whistling gopher is? Last one. Do you know what a whistling gopher is, Chris?
Do I know what a whistling gopher is? No.
Yep. It's the old guy that comes to the show and he looks at the biggest, the most outrageous RV there, and he goes up to the salesman. He goes, so what does that unit go for? And the guy says, well, it's $400,000. The guy goes, phew! That's a whistling gopher.
There you go.
How about that? All right. Well, I appreciate everybody coming out. I'm slow on that laugh track. I appreciate everybody coming out. And Chris, I really appreciate you joining us. And hopefully you'll be able to do it again more often with us, because it's nice to have, you and Dustin and guys that are turning wrenches out there and helping as much as we can. And you guys, if we didn't get your question in, send us, you got my email you can send it to, and we'll try to hit it. Or next week, I will not be here next week, so maybe Dustin and Chris can do that. I am heading to the Harrisburg show, and I will not be getting there till late. So we're going to try, and next week maybe do something from the Harrisburg show. So keep tuned for that. For that, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you coming out, and have a great rest of what the week is.